Scott Dixon has always been a favorite driver of mine. He was the champion of the first year I followed IndyCar racing, and his target cars always stuck out in my mind. They stuck out to the point that at my first trip to Indianapolis, I bought a 1/24 scale diecast of his car. He's statistically the second greatest driver in IndyCar history, but as many racing legends have said, no matter how much success you have, you'll always remember your first win. So on the 21st anniversary of it, this is a story of Scott Dixon's first IndyCar win. Entering the 25th IndyCar race at Nazareth Speedway and the third race of the 2001 kart season, the biggest story is what hadn't happened a week prior. With drivers suffering sustained 5 Gs and the cars going as fast as 236 miles an hour, the drivers were expressing some concerns during practice at Texas. They couldn't walk in a straight line for 5 minutes after getting out of their car, lost peripheral vision, and got dazed and confused to the point where they couldn't even tell where they were on the track. Head kart medic Dr. Steve Olvey talked with a former NASA flight director and eventually agreed that the drivers could suffer G-lock if the race were to go ahead, ultimately leading to its cancellation. Had this race gone ahead, I think the results would have been straight out of a horror movie. This whole situation really deserves its own video because the fallout from what happened completely overshadowed the race we'll be discussing. This was also the same week that the movie Driven came out, an abomination that capped off the worst PR weekend in kart history. And if you're one of the poor unfortunate bastards to have watched that movie, I feel sorry for you. Getting back to Nazareth, Bruno Junqueira would start this race from pole position at a speed of 172.873 miles an hour. Texas pole sitter Kenny Brack would start second, and Scott Dixon would start all the way back in 23rd, roughly 8 miles an hour slower than pole sitter Junqueira. To the start of the race now, it was a bad start for Brian Herta, who spun on lap 1 but managed to escape with no damage. The caution would still come out, with Kenny Brack taking the lead. On lap 8, Scott Dixon would come into the pits to top up on fuel. He comes back out, takes a restart, and stays towards the back of the field. He was outside the top 20 for the next 68 laps. When Michel Jourdain Jr. spun and brought out the caution on lap 74, it brought the field down pit road for a pretty chaotic round of pit stops. Bruno Junqueira would overshoot his box, Max Pappas' gearbox would go on strike, and Scott Dixon would line up 13th on the next restart. Scott was in a good position, but he just didn't have the car. His team hasn't won a race since 1997, and they've only finished on the podium a single time since. With that being said, Scott Dixon couldn't advance his position in the next 30 laps. On the bright side, however, he didn't lose a single place, staying in P13 when Tora Takagi brought out a caution for a spin. On lap 116, Scott Dixon came into the pits, putting himself on a strategy to go the rest of the way. He just needs some luck with some yellow flags and he'll be able to make it. He would get just that after a big wreck on the lap 119 restart, as a caution would come out and stay out for the next 25 laps. The field got shuffled up from this, with Kenny Brack relinquishing the lead for the first time and Scott Dixon moving all the way up to 4th. By lap 190, Scott would take the lead and hold it for the final 36 laps to win the 2001 Nazareth 225. This race would end up having a long-lasting legacy despite it being overshadowed by other events that happened in the 2001 kart season. It would be Scott Dixon's only kart win and one of the first stepping stones to his legendary career. Along with that, this race counted as Pac West Racing's last win, as less than a year later, the team would be sold. The 2001 Nazareth 225 would also be the last kart race at Nazareth, ending a 25-year-long relationship. 4 years later, both series and track were dead, with kart going bankrupt and Nazareth being left to the elements, abandoned, deteriorated, and the victim of arson. So that was the story of Scott Dixon's first IndyCar win, a story that turned 21 years old today. Thanks for watching, sorry I sound like crap, and have a great afternoon.